and welcome to the Flag to Flag Motorsport Podcast. My name's Charlie Roscoe, and I'm joined by expert livery designer Ryan from Ryan Lee Graphics, and as always, the esteemed Willie. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
How are we?
Alright then, gentlemen, I guess it's time to get stuck into discussing some racing, and of course we had a fantastic Formula 1 race as well as a MotoGP race, but let's start with the Formula 1. As three Australians on this podcast, pretty happy to see the winner was, of course, Dan Ricciardo.
It certainly wasn't a terrible result, was it?
No, it was a little unexpected at a place like Baku, but, obviously synonymous for its, near 2 kilometre front straight, or at least flat out area anyway. Yeah,
the whole race was full of just weird scenarios, crazy incidents. There was a red flag on lap 22.
Yeah, well, that's one thing you don't usually see at tracks except for Monaco, and I think this comes back to the fact that It is a fairly tight street circuit for the most of it. It's closed off, and access to the track by cars and marshals and things like that is obviously quite difficult because, of course, initially there was a safety car for debris. Well, actually, there was 2 safety cars. Both times it was for debris, and in fact, it was so hard to clear that debris in the second safety car section. They brought the safety car out. So, the red flag out. So that sort of saw that. But yeah, as I say, something like Monaco, you see where once a bit of debris gets on the track and cars are bumping and rubbing and all that sort of thing. They say rubbing is racing, but in Formula 1, rubbing pretty much equals carbon fibre parts getting strewn all over the track.
And it's instant punches.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which, of course, Kimi Räikkönen found out as the two, I think it was the 2 Force India boys got together, which was ridiculous, and I think they'll be feeling regret as much as anyone else, probably more than anyone else after the race. That could be a toss-up between the bloke who put Hamilton's headrest in and Sebastian Vettel, but I think Force India really missed out on a good result because they came together of all things, knocked the front wing off.
Especially right after Canada as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the whole thing with team orders and everything.
Yeah, well, there was just weird contact all around. Like even I think it was later in the race, lap 38. There was Ericsson and Verline, however you pronounce it.
Yep.
They even made contact. They showed a replay of it, and they had their wheels sort of crossed over, if that makes sense. So one car was back on the other one a little bit, so it was like front wheel to the other car. And then, sort of crossed over like that. And then they made contact into the braking area. So, that's late in the race after everything else had happened. So
that was actually pretty sloppy from Ericsson. And just to go back, using that point as well as your point about the team orders just before, I have found it particularly interesting with all the talk of, the reasons why they've had certain important people in their team leave. And people saying that basically sponsors wanted to know why, or they thought the team was giving preferential treatment to Pascal Wehrlein, and they wanted it for Ericsson. So there's all this, they wanted it for their driver. They're paying all this money to Sauber, and they obviously want to see the preferential treatment to Marcus Ericsson. And both drivers denied it. I don't know if you sort of kept up during the week as to what was going on there with Sauber, but both drivers denied that there was anything like that going on. It was all fair. The team was allowing them to race. But interestingly, even after Pascal Wehrlein said he doesn't know anything about that, in the race there was that team order, the radio message from him to say, "Am I allowed to attack Marcus? Can I try and overtake him?" I thought that was very interesting for people that have been denying any sort of preferential treatment within the team, and also someone who, anyway, I found that interesting.
Bigger than that, though, would have to be the way the race finished for the team, seeing as they put, I think it was Wehrlein ahead of Ericsson in the bid to try and get away from Van Dorn.
Of course, their response to that team message was, yes, of course you can. But I think that was saving face as much as anything, which maybe that's why he asked over team radio. Continue your point. Wehrlein did get past.
Yeah, so they put one past the other to try and get the gap so they could protect against Van Dorn coming up and all that. But the idea was that if they couldn't get far enough ahead, they were going to give back the place, because obviously that was for 10th, so that was the first points.
Yes.
Now, because of where Van Dorn was, there was 0.3 of a second behind them. They couldn't actually do the reversal.
Well, not safely, no, exactly.
So then they went on and got their points, and there's not a lot of incentive now for him to turn around and say, well, actually, no, I'm not going to do that because you screwed me over last time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I completely agree. But obviously when they came together, that was actually Ericsson overtaking Wehrlein at the time when that incident happened, because Wehrlein was in front, and Ericsson was a bizarre thing to actually watch because, and not a lot was discussed on the actual racing, but the way I saw it was, plain and simply, they came up alongside each other. Ericsson moved across to, obviously, all races want to take that sweeping line into the corner. You don't want to be shallow. You want to be as wide on the track as you can to cut in. Normal racing stuff. But it looked like Ericsson actually moved out, and there's nowhere to go at Baku. Much like Monaco, as I was discussing before, there's walls at the edge of the track, and Wehrlein can't disappear, and they made contact. It was a bizarre thing to watch. It's exactly what happened with the Force Indias later on, where... I might have got this order the wrong way around. Was it Perez getting overtaken or Perez doing the overtaking?
I think Ocon was up the going underneath, wasn't he?
It was Ocon overtaking Perez, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was going underneath.
Well, Ocon did the same thing
over
because
the curb.
He did, but he also just sort of pushed wide, and again, Perez can't disappear.
No.
It was an odd thing to watch. That one might have been a little bit more out of control than I could see. Ocon just might have simply been a passenger understeering and no hope, but...
Early in the race as well, everyone's trying to push for every little bit, and it's I kind of left that at what it was.
Yeah,
well, he bounced over the curb and had the steering correction and the slide and everything, and it was sort of just... That curb actually caught a few people out over the race too.
Yeah, well,
so
it was...
they wanted to make that not so
Bottas
aggressive.
Into Raikkonen, yeah?
Yep, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, bouncing over the curb. Yep. But
and
it's one of those things...
What about...
Yeah, it didn't it? The Raikkonens, you mean?
Oh, both of them.
Yeah.
Because, Raikkonen or Bottas down the entire side of the car had the wheel marks where it was all through the floor pan and all that.
Yeah.
But, both the cars were completely screwed.
Yeah. Which is exactly why Raven is not racing in Formula One. Like, it's a great, it's a great little saying, but...
Like, Bottas' car, it didn't come out of it too bad. He got back to the pits. He was back out on lap 13 and got lapped. So they got him going, and then after the red flag and everything, he unlapped himself, and then to come back and finish second, it's unreal,
crazy. And then to have both Perez and Raikkonen withdraw from the race, essentially DNF. Yep. Red flag comes out, and then they're back in the race again, and it's like, what the hell is going on here?
It was a bizarre thing, wasn't it?
And they both got a penalty as well.
Yeah, drive-through penalty for working on the car outside of the fast lane. It's one of those stupid rules which doesn't have an allowance for such an occasion. And the thing is, if they both hadn't have DNF'd right before the safety car, because of course they were both 2 laps down once the red flag was called, but they were allowed to unlap themselves once. They were allowed to go around once. It's such a unique thing that obviously no one that wrote the rule book had bothered to write in anything about it. So technically, they weren't in the fast lane. Therefore, technically, they were in breach of the rule, which said you can't work on a car outside the fast lane in the pits.
How many times is that going to happen, though?
That's what I mean. It's such a rare thing that no one had bothered actually writing that into the rule book. It was a bizarre thing, and I don't know, it's one of those things you'd like stewards to be able to kind of on the fly go, well, there's no point in giving you a drive-through penalty. They're already 1 lap down. We didn't let them unlap themselves twice. We only let them go around once. If they had let them go back on the lead lap and then given them a drive-through penalty, I can kind of see why that would have been a sensible thing to make sure they're penalised as well as being allowed back in the race. But to leave them 1 lap down, rather than bring them back to their equal lap, which they did with all the other cars, I think it should have been one or the other. Either lead lap...
The main thing would be, does someone gain any advantage by working on a car in a fast lane?
Outside of a fast lane, you mean?
Yeah, so if Hamilton or someone had to change tyres or whatever and they moved out of the fast lane, that would obviously be gaining an advantage.
It would, it would, and you're quite right.
Raikkonen's not going to gain anything from doing what they did.
Exactly. Well, I mean, they were just trying to get the car back together. They were just putting screws in, hoping for the best. I mean, they forgot his steering wheel. They pushed him out of the pits, started pushing him down the pit straight, and he actually had to jump on the radio and say, "Where's my steering wheel? I don't have one."
It's a wonder he could do that, because Don't you have to press a button on the steering wheel?
Yeah, I don't know how it works unless there's
there must be something else, but
there must be an override in case you crash or something like that, or your steering wheel stops working. Fine. I don't know how it works, but maybe that was incorrectly relayed. But either way, they forgot his steering wheel. So
See, Sebastian got the advantage from that. Had the most talked about incident of the race probably was when he ran into the back of Hamilton. Early on, it looked like Hamilton did brake check him, but apparently they've looked into it. And what happened on that corner, in my eyes, is that you had to have the gap. You got to warm your tyres up. Like the safety car was going too slow, so then he's probably got that small window of accelerate, brake at his own leisure.
Yeah.
You've got to try and get one over the guy behind you to break away, all those sorts of things. But anyway, he came out of the corner, jumped off the gas, and Seb didn't. He got on the gas and went around the corner, and then they touched. And then Sebastian got up beside him, pulled what looked to be both hands off the wheel, and the car just turned into him. Whether he bumped it or not.
Well, I think he had one hand on the wheel still.
But
I agree with you. Like my thing on that incident, and in case you've got this far through the podcast and you actually don't know what happened here, during a safety car restart, safety car was in that lap. Hamilton first, Vettel in second. As the safety car disappeared into the distance, Hamilton obviously slowed down to allow the safety car to get room. Coming out of the last corner, which I think that is classified as the last corner, isn't it? Or it might have been the second one.
I think it is, technically.
Yeah, technically they classify that as the last corner because the rest just bends flat out. But anyway, coming out of that corner, Vettel hit the back of him. Now, I actually agree with you, Willie. I don't think Hamilton brake checked him at all, but I think he did something that Vettel didn't expect him to do. I think he thought they'd go nice and slowly into that corner, and then Hamilton would punch out of the corner and head off towards the next line. Or, in fact, just not drive so slowly. But the thing that I think Vettel didn't factor in is the fact that it's Baku, and the poor old Mercedes AMG, fast car as it is, not comparatively to a Formula 1 car, has got to make it, probably a kilometre before he gets to pull into the pits. So Hamilton has to leave a bloody big gap.
Well, the case in point would be the exit of the safety car in the last one. There wasn't that long. The safety car was still on the track whilst the Formula 1 car were coming flat out down the street. So
it was. And they got fairly close to overtaking the safety car before it entered the first safety car pit line, which of course you're not allowed to do, and Hamilton would have had to have jumped on the brakes if that was a thing. But I think all it was Vettel. I place it solely on Vettel. I think he expected Hamilton to accelerate. Hamilton was there to slow down. Now, sure, that might be slower than expected. I think a lot of drivers could say Hamilton went a lot slower out of that corner than you would reasonably expect, but ultimately it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is Vettel, it's up to Sebastian to sit behind him and not run into him, regardless of what pace. Once the safety car's gone, Hamilton is the new safety car. You can't run into the back of the safety car and say, oh, geez, I thought I'd go a bit quicker out of that corner. It doesn't matter. You're going to get penalised. It's the same thing with Hamilton. He essentially becomes a safety car. It's Vettel's responsibility to not crash into the back of him. That slowed the whole pack down. No one else managed to run into the back of anyone else. So why did Seb, because he was eager, he was paranoid about losing the spot down the straight, and the safety car restart, which had happened just previously, he got a terrible launch off the last turn, and Hamilton disappeared. He was miles down, and as you say, nearly got overtaken. So that's part one of the incident. In my eyes, I think it's a mistake by Vettel. He just didn't expect Hamilton to do what he did, but Hamilton has every right to do it. Therefore, he was in the wrong. Then when he pulled up alongside to remonstrate with Lewis, I think he ran into him. Right, there's no doubt about that. But I don't think he actually meant to do it. I know the Hamilton guys are going, he deliberately did it and all that sort of thing. I think it was incompetence at that moment because he was looking to the right. He had one hand off the wheel out the window. And it's like if you drive your own car on the road, if you drive along in a straight line, and I don't recommend doing this, of course, but if you do, and you look out the right window at something pretty, when you look back straight, I guarantee you've moved over to the right. Your car has drifted to the right because that's the way you're looking. You go where you look. They teach you that when you drive, when you ride motorbikes, you go where you look.
It was quite a violent impact though, and I think
and that's why I don't think he would do it on purpose, because he's more likely to end up with a bent or broken wishbone because he's the one coming over to do the impact. Hamilton's just sitting still. I don't think it was on purpose. I just think it was incompetence at the time. It was more focused on pointing fingers and yelling and carrying on and making a big deal about it than he was actually concentrating where he was going. And I don't think he meant to steer into Hamilton, but it's still his fault for doing it.
Because it made it look more violent because they're very stiff, rigid Formula 1 cars and it's wheel-to-wheel.
Yeah.
It was the wheel-to-wheel. Yeah.
For me, the most exciting part of all of what has just been explained would have to be Ferrari avoiding any word of it after the race.
Yeah, Seb was pretty good, wasn't he? When they're like about that incident, and he's like,
any of them, anyone from Ferrari, they were talking. Was it deliberate? Oh, of course. Of course he jumped on the brakes. So what about the collision? Yeah, well, I hit up the back of him. No, the collision on the side. Was it deliberate? No, well, no. And it's like fully just missing the point. I think, he'd make a great politician.
Yeah, he was ready from the start when they're like, you've got a 10-second stop penalty for dangerous driving. And he's like, what for? And the commentators are like, seriously?
You're kidding, aren't you? But again, I think this further proves my point that it was an accident. I don't think Vettel ever meant to actually hit him. He was at more risk of getting bent wishbones than Lewis was.
Oh, but
I think it was incompetence, and of course he knows it happens, but I think it's very embarrassing. When you do something like that, when you run into a competitor in a situation under a safety car like that, it's embarrassing as hell. If you were a first-year rookie in Formula 1 and you did that at your first race, it would still be embarrassing. For a four-time world champion, that's as embarrassing it gets. That's just incompetence at its finest. You're carrying on like an idiot at something that was your fault. He ran into him, and I think he accidentally turned into Lewis. Was lucky he didn't damage either car, and I think he was embarrassed as hell, and I think he just blocked it out of his mind and went, it didn't happen. Sorry, didn't happen. I don't know what you're talking about. That's too embarrassing. I'm not admitting that.
Yeah, it's probably what happened to Carlos Sainz as well, I reckon. When he was going into turn 1, went to get up beside his teammate and just bagged him up and spun out. You think, oh yeah, nice one. Jeez, you're a good driver.
Well, that was he was trying to avoid.
Yeah, and he'd flattened the throttle to accelerate out of the turn, and at the last second with the foot already flat, his teammate re-entered the track. Out of pure instinct, he just steered left a little bit with a flat throttle. Bang, round you go. There's no traction control. It's just loads of torque, however much torque Formula 1 cars got. I don't call that incompetence. I think that was just situational. He probably should have backed off the throttle as he steered left. He obviously didn't do that, but that might just be the old hands were thinking a bit quicker than the foot on that occasion. Still a mistake. It's a driver mistake, but it's a little bit...
One of those things probably if it was a little bit further on in the race, in the heat of battle, but early on it certainly looked a bit amateur hour, didn't it, at a quick glance.
Yeah, initially, obviously, you thought, well, what's happened there? He hasn't even made contact. But no, I'm going to put that down to just simple. He'd already flattened it to accelerate out of the corner, and then his brain reacted. He steered left to avoid collision, but forgot to back off the throttle. Or just didn't quite get it done as quickly. I don't know how instant these throttle responses are. I'd imagine in Formula 1, as instant as you'll get anything ever.
Yep.
But
so... On top of all that, though, a turn of times for McLaren. Finishing races, what the hell's this? Let alone in the points.
Yeah, I know. But, I mean, it's one of those things. Only 13 people finished, and Grosjean was, in fact, a lap down at that point because of issues that he had. I think his brakes completely failed there at one point. Not completely failed, obviously, but they're no longer really working effectively.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't approach a corner with any confidence at all.
No, once your foot was going pretty much to the firewall, you're going to just tippy-toe around, and that's how you end up a lap down. But having said that, Stoffel Van Dorn finished, that's great, but he was dead last of the finishers. If you discount Roman Grosjean, let's not get carried away. He was 12th, all right? Jeez, calm down. And then Fernando Alonso was only 9th. So the only people that Fernando Alonso managed to beat legitimately was his teammate and the two Saubers, who had already collided.
But having said that, though, the cars finished the race, and I think
they did.
You have to be reliable before you're fast.
I agree. I agree.
Yes.
But having said that, it's easier to have a fast car that you can just wind back a little bit and make it still competitive but reliable. The problem is they've got both things wrong, and I think they've turned the car down enough to get reliability. That's good, but it's still got no power. It's rubbish, you know. He was still 10 seconds. Even with that late restart, he was still 10 seconds behind Carlos Sainz and Toro Rosso, who, as we've discussed, had his own problems through the race. He was not even close. At one point there, I was just saying before we started the podcast how good it was to see when Vettel had to pit for his penalty. Hamilton had his neck protection come loose. How good was it to look down the field and go, okay, well, you've got Dan Ricciardo it's going to be effectively first. You had Lance Stroll in second at the time. Third, I think, was the Magnussen in the Haas, and then I think it was Sainz and then Alonso in fifth, and you're like, geez, Alonso's fifth, this is fantastic, and then he just got mugged, relentlessly mugged by anyone that was within 20 seconds, 30 seconds of him.
As did Sainz and Magnussen. You know,
correct.
They all got eaten up alive by the two Mercedes and the Ferrari.
Yeah, and that's it, and the Force India as well. But
Yeah.
to go back to the Force Indias, they were right when they said we could have come first and second because they were in front of Dan and they were quicker than the Red Bull. And if they hadn't have come together with each other, I think the podium would have been 1-2, the big flying Pink Panthers, and third place Dan Ricciardo, and I think they gave that away with their own stupidity. But it's nice to see Lance Stroll up there. The kid's finally done something. He's had a pretty terrible start to the year, done nothing in the Williams. I was actually a bit disappointed for him when Bottas got him on the line.
How bad was that, though? Unlucky as.
Yeah, it was right on it.
Yeah. There was, 5 or 6 metres, I think?
Yeah, it didn't try any
such
blocking
a speed
or anything.
differential. I actually wonder if they had pretty much said, you've got second. Congrats.
Yeah.
Good work. And I think in his brain he's gone, that's it. Whereas you've got Bottas coming around the last turn. They'd have been turning the engine up. He'd have been holding they'd have been giving him every single thing they had. He'd have just about been reaching out of the car to pull bits of carbon fibre off it to get less drag, to try and make that on the line. And I can't help but think that perhaps Stroll came out of the last turn thinking, hey, I just got second. And then it just accelerated as per normal, didn't worry too much. Maybe didn't turn it up to a richer mixture, which of course the Mercedes would have done. Yeah. Just such a speed differential against another car with the Mercedes engine in it.
But the engine surely wouldn't be this year's engine either. Wouldn't that be last year's engine?
I don't know how. I think Formula 1's a bit different. You get a customer engine. I think it's still the current spec engine. For the main guys.
Sauber's got last year's.
Sauber's got last year's Ferrari.
I don't know about the Mercedes programs, though.
No, well, I think Mercedes gives you the same one. You just wouldn't have all the up-to-date trick bits that the actual Mercedes factory car would have. And if you were able to beat them, they'd quickly remove them from you.
Yeah, which is like what you
the
say.
Mercedes would have a better chassis.
Yeah, better chassis and better aero as well. They've got more money to throw at it, so they've got the better package all in all. But either way, that Mercedes engine should have been dragging Lance down there quick enough to fend off Bottas. So he came out of that last turn quite a way back, and he gained, I can't remember what the time was. They didn't actually say what it was from the last turn, but I think the sector prior, he was 1.8 seconds back. That's a hell of a lot of time to make up in a corner, or a couple of corners. So, I don't know. But it doesn't matter. The kid got third, and that's great. It was on the podium, so it's nice to see some fresh faces up there. Dan Ricciardo, Valtteri Bottas, and Lance Stroll. It was a slightly different podium, even though Bottas was still there, but it was good.
Yeah. So, I come across some interesting numbers over the last couple of days. One article in particular was put directly towards McLaren, and the amount of grid penalty positions that they've had to cop since Honda came in.
Yeah, now, I've seen this. It's a joke.
560 grid positions they've been handed penalties for since Honda came on. Yeah. That is a lot.
That's a reflection of how broken the rules are, and how one-track minded they are, and how that there's no changing their minds on the fly to suit Yeah, for sensible. There's no common sense rulings coming in over what's been written black and white on a piece of paper, which I think was only ever written with about 2 or 3 teams in mind. Let's stop the top couple of teams from doing this, that and the other. And I don't necessarily think that all the teams were taken into consideration.
Well, that's the thing. And I mean, what's the point in having a penalty system which you can allot 560 grid points penalties when over a couple of years, there's not that many points penalty spots to lose in per race anyway. Because you've just been handed 70 grid spots. Okay, well I'll start two or three spots down from where I was going to anyway.
Yeah, it's the rules itself that are broken. There needs to be some common sense, and there needs to be some performance clause. If you get a new manufacturer join Formula One and they are struggling to be competitive, you need to have an allowance in your rulebook that gives them a whole bunch more than other teams to get them competitive. Because what we want is as many factory teams racing at the front as we possibly can. And
especially if they're struggling like they are after 3 years.
That's what I mean. Have a performance clause in there. Say if they're not able to do this, that, or the other, or they're DNFing this amount of races or whatever, give them more allowance. Give teams like Sauber and teams like Renault, they're struggling. They're not keeping up with the front guys. Give them less strict rules or change it or something like that. Let's say the top 3 teams from the previous year get this, and this, and then I don't know. Yep. There just needs to be a different allowance for the different teams. Otherwise, you're always going to have this difference, this huge monumental gap between the top and the bottom teams.
Exactly.
Yep. And I thought the point of all of this was to actually even things up, to stop the big teams from getting away. And what it's actually doing is making it harder for the struggling teams to catch up. Because Mercedes don't need to replace their engine as many times because they've already got the best engine. So why do they need to replace parts as often as they do? Make it a rule for them. Sure, those guys can have 4 engines for the years, but Honda, you guys are struggling. You can have 4 engines a race until you get competitive. That's exaggeration, but you know what I'm saying.
Whatever, even it out a little bit. Now, the other thing I did see was a list of 27 race mileage by teams. Now, I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but who do you think is on the top of the most amount of laps?
I would imagine probably be one of the struggling teams, simply because they need to get more research. But I could be wrong.
This is the amount of laps during races this year.
Oh, just on race weekends.
Yeah.
The most amount.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Force India.
Yep.
I say that because they're a team that struggles but don't struggle, and they've made massive improvements. So they would be out there for every session getting as much data as they can. That's why I went with that.
And who's got the lowest?
Probably McLaren, because they're always broken. No,
and they're too scared to go out.
It's probably Mercedes, because they don't need to go out.
No, it's Red Bull.
Really? Red Bull got the least.
Red Bull has completed 685 laps between the 2 drivers this year in races.
Yep.
Whilst McLaren has completed 716.
Okay.
Verstappen has completed the least amount of laps of any driver this year, not including the ring-ins.
Oh, there you go.
Because even Stroll has finished 358 laps, whereas Verstappen's only finished 277.
Perhaps that's a reflection of the fact that Red Bull can get the best out of a Renault engine when it's at its freshest, and they don't want to risk putting extra mileage on it for fear of having to turn the engine down during races to make it last the allotted amount of races it has to last.
Who knows?
Could be that.
I just thought it was pretty interesting.
Interesting way to yeah.
Both Hamilton and Vettel have got the most amount of laps, and they're both tied on 487.
There you go.
Who obviously, I'm guessing they've completed every lap or something. I don't know.
Yeah. No, well, that's a very interesting way to finish the Formula One part of this podcast, which I think we'll do right now.
Yeah.
So moving over to MotoGP, of course. Fantastic race this weekend. Really, really good race, actually, especially if you're a Valentino Rossi fan, which, as it turns out, 2 of us here at least probably are.
I wouldn't say I'm not a fan.
Nah.
I wouldn't say
No.
I wouldn't say I'm not a fan. I'm just impartial because I don't know who he's going up against, and he's one of the only people that I actually really know.
Yeah. No. Look. Willie and I obviously are supporting Rossi to get his 10th championship, and then he can bugger off after that. He's had enough. But no, look, it was a good one for Rossi. He was actually competitive from the start of the race. Did exactly the right thing, followed him, went with the lead group, and disappeared towards the end. But the race was probably a little bit more interesting than that little summary there, Willie.
Oh, it was. Look, the result right at the end, I had a little bit of excited wee come out. It was pretty good. Especially since that Rossi only won by, was it 0.063?
It was, correct, yeah. 600ths of a second over his good off-track friend, because let's emphasise the fact that I don't think there's ever on-track friends in racing at all.
Mm.
In fact, half the time your good friends are your good enemies on the racetrack. But of course, let's not skip over Petrucci there. That's 2 races in a row. Where's the kid found this form? I say kid, he's not that young. He's a former police officer. He's been around the traps for a little while, and all of a sudden on this Pramac Ducati, how good's Petrucci going?
Yeah, it's really shown as soon as he gets somewhat of a good bike. Proves that he can ride like a bastard, which he really does, and especially in trying conditions as well, because it did rain, and probably the most stupid mistake of the race was when Zarco went into the pits and put wets on, because they waved the flag saying that...
Well, let's classify for a second. You said it rained, but let's be honest, it didn't rain. What it did do was spit a little bit. There's a few drops, a few spits, never enough to warrant changing a tyre, never enough to, do any more really than put a few spots on their windshield. I don't even think their pace slowed down that much. So it didn't so much rain, but what it did do is create a lot of doubt for riders. And you could see Rossi, who was on fire at the point that the spit started coming down, he rolled off a little bit, which is fine. He's in the lead and he's going to be more cautious than the people following him. And of course, I think once Petrucci came up and got through, then it gave Rossi an indication of how it was going. But as you say, Zarco...
Yeah, I think he was going for that brilliant plan, because early on in the weekend, when it poured with rain, there was one session I watched and it was pouring with rain on one part of the track and the other side was almost fully dry. So it might have been the fact that it was raining a little bit more prior to the pits, and he thought, bugger, it's getting harder, and he pulled in. But this is weird, because at the time he was in something like 4th position, or something like that.
He was dropping, and inevitably, I think, would have lost out to Crutchlow and Dovizioso. I'm not sure that Miller would have caught him. Miller was a long way behind Dovizioso, to the tune of 18 seconds or something like that.
Look, he always plays it dangerous with his tyres, because he was on soft. Everyone else was on medium. There was a couple, but Rossi was on medium hard, and that's why he's always really good at the end of the race. He just maps out his race pace for the race, sits there, works out what he can do. You might see him punch in a couple of good laps and close the gap up, makes him realise sort of what he's got to fight with, holds it off and then fires at the end. That's his normal style, where Zarco comes out like a bull at a gate. He's always on softs, whether it's a soft medium or most of the time it's a soft. So I reckon he burnt up, and he may not have had any choice, but it's still weird that he did that, and he got done for speeding in pit lane with only 3 laps to go.
Yeah, well, that was just bad luck, unfortunately. When he did change those tyres, it's not something that they don't pit every race. They probably only pit during a race a couple of times a year. If they speed in a practice session, they just get a warning. They get a slap on the wrist. Nothing bad happens to them.
Yep.
So you're probably not used to caring so much. So that was just a bit of bad luck. And also, he's a rookie. You've got to remember that
that's right.
First year in the competition, and look, he is amazing at tyre life. He's almost one of the best people out there at looking after tyres. Danny Pedrosa is obviously very good because he weighs about 4 kilos, but Zarco is very good, and he was in Moto2 as well. But I also think he needs to learn the limitations of the MotoGP tyres. So whereas he might be going out on the soft combination going, yep, I'll be fine, I'm good on tyres, I'll get this to the end. Maybe with a bit of experience, he'd go, you know what, a medium combination would probably be a safer bet. Whilst still on the softer side, whilst you've got people going for hard compound rears, even a soft front medium rear, I think would probably do him a world of good. But he'll figure all that out on his own, and I'm sure he knows better than I do what he needs to do. But Nonetheless, it was a risky manoeuvre. He was going backwards, so I think, as you say, burnt the tyres out. He had not much soft left to go. And I think he almost certainly would have lost out to... he'd already lost out to Marc Marquez. Marquez had gone through, and Crutchlow and Dovizioso weren't far behind him. So he would have... But even then, that would have put him in 5th, which is not a terrible result. Because I don't think Jack Miller would have caught him. But it was a huge risk at a bit of rain. But it's one of those things, those risks you take, you either end up coming off looking like an absolute freaking genius who just knew better, and the commentators would have been up in arms. The media would have been just stunned at how good this Johann Zarco is. He knew to go straight in. He's the rain man. But unfortunately, when it doesn't come down in a deluge, you end up looking a bit foolish, which is what ended up happening. But I think there's also a bit of experience that you need to learn. Like, the number one thing is you don't need to pit for wet weather tyres until there's spray coming off the tyres. Even on a motorbike, even on slick tyres, until you can see spray coming off the wheels, the tyres, you don't need to pit for wets. And the fact that he pitted with a few light sprinkles when there wasn't even a moisture on the road yet, that's your first indication. When the road starts getting wet, when the track starts getting a little bit wet, then you can start thinking about it. He just dived straight in the pits. It was, even if... I mean, he wasn't just relying on the rain to come, he was relying on the heavens to open and a Singapore-style monsoon to just unleash its fury in 1 to 2 laps, because that's how quickly you'll burn out the soft wet weather tyres, is 2 laps. Yeah,
it was certainly pretty bold. It was a shame because the battle early on in the race, which was Zarco, Marquez, Rossi and Petrucci, was very tight. And that was going quite well. And then, right at the end was Rossi and Dovi was added to that little mix with Petrucci and Marquez there. That was great. The amount of times they kept passing, and Dovi and Petrucci, because Rossi at that stage had a little gap before it started spinning again, they were just... a couple of corners, one had passed, another couple of corners, the other one would go back past, and so on and so forth for quite a few laps. And it was actually pretty exciting to watch, and there was actually a couple of pretty gutsy manoeuvres that went on. And the way it all panned out towards the end was all of a sudden Crutchlow just came out of nowhere.
I think it was the changeable conditions. Like I said earlier, I don't think the lap times dropped at all. They did actually drop, just not a lot. Not anything you'd like to expect with a normal wet track, but they definitely slowed. And it was the second that they slowed that Crutchlow went, I'm not slowing down. And we know people like... again. And we know people like Crutchlow and Miller are amazing in the wet and trying conditions. And they know when you need to back off and when you don't. They knew that it was a light sprinkle and didn't mean anything, so they just kept pushing on, and they overtook. I mean, Jack Miller as well, he obviously came 6th. That's fantastic for him, but it wasn't that much earlier in the race that he was nowhere near 6th. A couple of people obviously fell off in front of him. Maverick went down, which is fantastic, by the way, for the championship. Sorry for all the Viñales fans watching. I don't mean any insult to him, but the championship needed that to happen, and it did. But Jack Miller and Cal Crutchlow, as soon as the spits came down, the riders just backed off, probably half a second a lap or a little bit more. Suddenly, Miller and Crutchlow were just smashing it. Like they were out there just running rings around everyone, and of course it got them 4th and 6th respectively, whereas they wouldn't have been anywhere near that, I think, if no rain had come.
Yeah, well, I suppose that attitude also is... like the bin or to win it, like they've got nothing to lose. I was a little bit happy that Marquez did get Crutchlow right at the very end. Only because...
Same. We need Marquez to get good points.
Yeah, to help with the championship battle.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, there's that little part of me that I've had a bit of a love and hate sort of following for Crutchlow over times. Like, you see him pull in some great races and you think, well done. Like, you deserve that.
You want to like him on the track, but you can't like him off the track.
No, because as soon as he gets into the pit lane, he goes, I was the fastest in that. If there was another 2 laps, I would have just passed everybody. If there was another 3 or 4 laps beyond that, I would have lapped the whole field.
Yeah,
like he just has
I
that
remember
attitude.
even before he came to MotoGP, I remember his countrymen used to call him the walking ego. So he's definitely got tabs on himself. He's probably eased a little bit with as he's got a bit older and he hasn't had much success. He's probably calmed down a touch, but he's still definitely pretty involved with himself. So I know what you're saying there, and it was good for that reason, but also because Marquez needed some points in the championship, and that's when I'll come back. We may as well talk about the championship now. New championship leader, and I think possibly, I don't have any stats here, so if you're a statistician, don't hate me, but I don't think Dovizioso would have ever led a championship before in MotoGP. I don't believe. Unless there was some race where he won the first round or something like that, and he's led from there. But otherwise, there wouldn't have been.
No,
so it's
look
good.
At him go.
We got a
look
new
at him
leader.
go. And it would be the first time Ducati has led the championship since Casey Stoner.
Yes, you're quite right.
It certainly would be. It would be the first time since 2010 that Ducati has led the championship.
Yep, and certainly the best they've looked since Stoner left of actually winning a championship.
Yep.
It's good.
And Dovy's got a bit of mongrel about him now. Like, you watch him in the end of the race there, and he's not just, I'm going to be captain safe.
Which
and
he
everything
was
else.
for a few years, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was never really, like, he could lead the whole race and look bulletproof, but you knew in the last couple of laps he'd just sort of fade off. Where now it just seems he's got these couple little victories under his belt, and he goes, you know what? I've got confidence in this bike. I've got confidence in how I ride, how tyres last, and everything else, and how that's all sort of panning out this year. And he's looking really good, and Lorenzo is not.
No,
so
Lorenzo's...
I would be starting to have money chats and just say, righto, I don't want to rub it in, guys, but next year, Lorenzo and I, salary swap.
Yeah. Well, I don't think, at his current form, I don't think Lorenzo's got much hope of retaining the sort of salary he's currently got. But, look, it's good to see Dovizioso at the top. We've got a new championship leader. It's good for the sport, I think. It's good for Dovizioso because he deserves one. He used to be a great racer back in the Repsol Honda days, but I think when he got moved to the number 3 person in the team, because remember they ran him as a third, and then when they moved him down to other, of course he jumped over to Tech 3 and it all fell apart for him, his career and everything. And he just never looked the same as he did when he first sort of hit that Repsol Honda. Well, I think he's back this year. And look, if Rossi can't get his 10, then I hope Dovizioso is the champion. I really do. It'd be nice to see someone different. And the good thing, what I was saying about Maverick Viñales falling off, as much as we never want to see that, obviously he wasn't injured, so that's fine. But the point is, he had a fair old gap. Now all of a sudden you got Dovizioso on 115 points. You got Viñales on 111, so only 4 points behind.
Yep.
Rossi on 108, so he's only 3 points behind, and Marquez is now on 104, which is only 4 points behind Rossi. So we suddenly have a 4-way tie for the championship. Points. Yeah, covered by 9 points.
Yep, and it was 28 points to Rossi, whatever position he was in prior to this. There was between Viñales and Rossi, so first and, I don't know, third or fourth, whatever he was in, there was 28 points.
Yeah.
So obviously 25 points for a win. Maths, that's how it works.
Yep. Speaking of maths, it's actually 11 points to cover the top 4, but keep going.
Yeah, it has really just closed it all right up.
11 points covering the top 4 people at this stage. We're almost at the halfway stage of the season. It's fantastic. This is one of the best MotoGP seasons in terms of diversity across the board that we've seen for a long time. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to the next rounds and seeing how they go.
It keeps it exciting. The last couple of years, it's sort of... last year, I think Marquez sort of ran away with it a little bit, and it just takes that edge off, where something like this is very exciting. And even, like you said, even if Valentino Rossi doesn't win his 10th, if we can be waiting until the last race to see whether he does or not, I'll be happy. Obviously, I'll be very happy if he wins his 10th, and then he can do whatever he likes. But, yeah... I just want to see a battle right to the end. And it'd be exciting for it to be more than 2 people.
That's if it could keep a 4-way battle to the end, even a 3-way battle to the end. That's good. It's good for the championship. It's good for the fans. And currently, out of those top 4, there's a 50% chance that we're going to have a new world champion this year. So that's a pretty cool prospect as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, if Rossi or Marquez win, we won't. But we got Viñales and Dovizioso. Both of them will be new world champions, or either of them would be new world champions. So at the moment, 50% chance out of 4 people for a brand new world champion. I think that's good as well.
Yeah, well, I think they had the stat the other day about how old Marc Marquez was when Rossi took his first win.
Yeah.
I don't know why they'd bring that up. They would have been better off to talk about Rossi's teammate Viñales, because I'm pretty sure he's 22, and when Rossi won on the weekend, he is the longest sort of reigning winner, which was 20 years and 38 days, I'm pretty sure the number was.
313 days. 20 years, 313 days.
Was it? Right.
Yeah, so it's very close to 21 years, actually, but...
yeah, well, it was at that track that he took his first win in the 1-2 Phillips.
It was. So, yeah, he loves Assen. He's won there 10 times. That's not a bad record. That means, give or take, 50% of the time he goes there, he wins a race.
Yeah, well, he's won there 10 times, so it could be the year of the 10s. So
could be.
Let's hold our cross our fingers, not hold our breaths. I'm not going to hold my breath.
No, it's a long way away, the last race.
I won't be able to hold my breath till probably about another 2 minutes, let alone to the end of the year.
To December, that's it. But anyway, that's we are going to wrap the podcast up there. A bit of a long one, but we had 2 fantastic races, especially that Formula 1 race. So hopefully you did enjoy it. And thanks, of course, to everyone who has joined us for this episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. And feel free to check out all of our podcasts over on YouTube or by visiting our website at www.flagtoflag.ml. And of course, last but not least, thanks for joining me, Ryan and Willie.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Well, we look forward to talking to you all next time. Bye for now.